stay till the end. Because what happened in that dealership on a Tuesday afternoon in October changed more than one life. It exposed something most people spend their whole careers pretending doesn't exist. The lot was quiet when Walter Pruitt pulled in. Not the good kind of quiet. The kind that meant the salespeople inside had already sized him up through the glass before he even cut the engine. He drove a 2009 Chevy Silverado that had seen better decades. The tailgate had a dent the shape of a parking bollard. The passenger side mirror was held on with electrical tape he'd meant to replace for 2 years. He parked between a gleaming white BMW and a bright red Porsche Cayenne and didn't think much of it. His daughter, Sophie, was 7 years old and had fallen asleep in the back seat somewhere around exit 42, her head lolling against the window, a stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. Walter sat there for a moment before he got out. He looked at the showroom through the windshield. Clean glass, bright lights, rows of vehicles that cost more than most people's mortgages. Then he looked at Sophie in the rearview mirror. The curve of her jaw, the way her eyelashes rested on her cheeks, and something quiet and certain settled in his chest. He got out of the truck. He was wearing what he always wore when he wasn't at a job site. Dark jeans, a gray thermal pullover, work boots that still had clay dust in the seams from the week before. His hands were the hands of someone who had spent a long time working with them, knuckles slightly enlarged, a scar along the left index finger from a copper pipe fitting in 1998. He was 47 years old, and he looked it, in the honest way that has nothing to do with vanity. His hair had gone silver at the temples. He hadn't shaved since Sunday. The dealership was Caldwell Luxury Auto, no relation to anyone he knew, just a name on a sign, and it occupied a full city block on Route 9 in Hargrove, New Jersey. 6 months ago, Walter had driven past it on his way to a job site and thought, one day. Today was that day. He pushed through the glass door. The showroom smelled like expensive air. That was the only way to describe it. Curated, filtered, faintly cedar, the kind of smell that costs money to maintain. 3 vehicles sat on the gleaming floor under track lighting. A black Range Rover, a pearl-white Mercedes GLS, and a midnight blue Audi Q8, with a red bow still on the hood from some display that had never been taken down. The bow had faded a little at the edges. There were 3 salespeople visible. Was with a couple near the Mercedes, young woman in a blazer, the couple matching her energy with practiced enthusiasm. One was on a phone call in the back, pacing behind a glass partition. The third was standing near the reception desk, arms loosely crossed, watching Walter walk in. His name tag said Brendan. He was in his late 20s, the kind of good-looking that he was clearly aware of, with the easy posture of someone who had never once doubted whether he belonged in a room. He watched Walter cross the floor for about 4 seconds before his expression settled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Help you find something?" Brendan asked. His tone had a particular texture. Not rude, exactly. Practiced. The kind of tone that asks a question while already knowing the answer. "Just looking at the Q8, Walter said. Brendan glanced at the Audi, then back at Walter. The glance took less than a second but carried a full paragraph's worth of assessment. "That one's our top trim. Starts at 112. Walter nodded. "I know." Another beat. Brendan let his gaze drift, briefly, almost imperceptibly, toward the lot outside where Walter's Silverado sat between the BMW and the Porsche, like a sentence that didn't belong in the paragraph. Then back to Walter. "We do have some certified pre-owned inventory in the back," Brendan said. "Lot of great options in the 50 to 70 range. I can walk you through." "I'm fine here," Walter said. He walked around to the driver's side of the Q8 and bent slightly to look at the door trim. Brendan followed at a distance that communicated supervision rather than service. "Are you looking for yourself or myself? You have a trade-in?" Walter nodded toward the lot without looking up. "The Silverado." Brendan followed his nod. There was a pause. "Right." Another pause. The valuation on something like that would be pretty modest. Might not move the needle much on financing. "I'm not financing." A beat. "You're paying cash." "That's the plan," Walter said. Brendan's expression didn't change, exactly. It reorganized. The easy condescension was still there, but now it was doing different work. Now it was performing skepticism as professionalism, which is a specific kind of unpleasantness that people in sales sometimes develop when their intuitions have led them too far down one road to turn around. "Okay," Brendan said. "Well, cash purchases over 100,000 do require verification of funds before we can hold inventory. Just policy." "Sure," Walter said. He straightened up and looked at the car properly for the first time, running one hand along the roofline. "Can I sit in it?" A pause that lasted just a half-second too long. Of course. Brendan unlocked it with a remote from his belt. Walter opened the driver's door, checked the sill, clean seam, solid thunk, and lowered himself into the seat. He adjusted the mirror out of habit. He put both hands on the wheel. He sat there for a moment. He was thinking about his wife, Rachel. He did this in moments he hadn't planned for, the way grief works when it's been long enough that you've mostly learned to live alongside it. It doesn't announce itself, it just surfaces quietly in the spaces where joy almost arrives. Rachel had died 4 years ago, 39 years old, a brain aneurysm on a Wednesday morning while Sophie was at kindergarten and Walter was 80 feet underground supervising a tunnel inspection. By the time anyone reached him, it was already done. They had talked about getting a better car, someday when the company was solid, someday when the projects were bigger and the margins held. Rachel had joked that she wanted heated seats before she turned 40. She never made it to 40. Walter sat in the seat and thought, she would have loved this car. "Interior's nice," he said. Brendan was standing outside the open door, hands in his pockets. 22-way adjustable seats. Massaging, heated, ventilated. Full Valcona leather. "What's the lead time on a custom build?" Brendan blinked. "A build? You want to spec it out?" "If I'm buying it, I'd rather choose the options. Custom builds are 12 to 16 weeks out of the factory. Most buyers prefer to take from existing inventory." "I'm not most buyers," Walter said without particular emphasis. "Just information." He got out of the car. He looked at the sticker in the window. Base price $112, then $400. The trim options bringing it to $127,950. He looked at it the way an engineer looks at a specification sheet. Methodical, patient. Brendan's phone buzzed. He checked it, and while he was looking at it, a door at the back of the showroom opened and a woman walked through. Her name was Renata Hollis. She was the general manager of Caldwell Luxury Auto, had been for 6 years, and she had the walk of someone who had fought for the right to move through a room like she owned it, and had eventually won. She was 52, black, with reading glasses pushed up on her head that she never seemed to actually use for reading, and a gray suit jacket over a burgundy shell. She was holding a manila folder, and her expression was neutral in the focused way that means you are thinking about something else entirely. She was crossing toward the back office when she glanced up. She saw Walter. She stopped walking. For a moment, just a moment, something shifted in her expression. Not dramatically, not the way things shift in movies, with swelling music and slow motion. It was small and quick, like a word you almost recognize in a foreign language. Her eyes moved from Walter to Brendan, then back to Walter, and then she changed direction. "Mr. Pruitt," she said. Walter turned. He looked at her for half a second before recognition arrived. "Mrs. Hollis." Brendan looked between them. "How long has it been?" Renata asked. She reached out a hand and Walter took it. A firm, unhurried handshake, the kind that happens between people who have been on equal footing. 6 years maybe, Walter said. "The Mercer Tunnel project. 7, she said. "It was 7. I remember because my son started middle school that fall, and I kept thinking I was going to miss his first day." A pause. "I didn't miss it." "Good," Walter said. Brendan had taken one slow step backward, as if he might be able to exit the situation by retreating into it quietly enough. "Are you being helped?" Renata asked Walter. The question was addressed to him, but her attention extended outward in that particular managerial way that meant she was also asking something else. "Just looking at the Q8, Walter said. "He wants a custom build," Brendan said quickly. I was explaining the lead time. Renata looked at Brendan for exactly 1 second. I've got it from here, Brendan. She didn't say it with any heat. She didn't need to. Brendan nodded once and walked away. He walked at a pace that was trying to look unhurried. It didn't quite get there. Renata turned back to Walter. Walk with me. I want to show you something in the lot. 7 years ago, Renata Hollis had been the operations director for a regional development firm that was managing a federally funded infrastructure project in Bergen County. The project involved a drainage tunnel, a significant one, running beneath 4 city blocks of residential property, and it had run into problems. Specifically, the lead contractor had made a series of structural decisions early in the build that the engineering firm flagged too late. The ground beneath the 3rd block was not what the original survey said it was. There was a layer of soft fill beneath the clay that hadn't been properly mapped, and if the boring continued on the current trajectory, the tunnel would eventually compress unevenly, and the surface above would begin to show stress fractures within 3 to 5 years. The contractor didn't believe it. He had been in the industry for 30 years, and he did not like being told by anyone that he had made an error, let alone by someone who looked the way Walter Pruitt looked. Jeans, flannel, methodical, not given to speeches. Walter had sat across a conference table from the contractor and 7 other people, including Renata, and he had laid out his analysis in 12 pages of documentation with 73 reference points. He had not raised his voice. He had not performed certainty. He simply had it, the way a person has a bone structure. You either know something or you don't. The contractor had laughed at one point, actually laughed, in front of the whole room, not cruelly, but with the comfortable confidence of a man who had never once had his expertise questioned by someone wearing work boots in a meeting. Walter, he'd said, I've built more tunnels than you've had hot dinners. Walter had looked at him calmly and said, that may be, but the survey data is what it is. The project was halted. An independent geotechnical firm confirmed Walter's analysis within 2 weeks. The contractor's approach was revised at a cost of $4.2 million. The tunnel was completed 14 months later correctly, and it was still carrying water under those 4 blocks of New Jersey residential property with no signs of compression or surface stress. Walter hadn't made a big deal of it afterward. He'd been right. That was the end of the story for him. For Renata Hollis, it was a different story. She had been the one who fought to bring in a second opinion when everyone around her was telling her the project was fine. She had been the one who found Walter's name in a referral from a civil engineering colleague, and she had been the one who sat across that table and watched a man who looked like he'd just come from fixing a pipe in someone's basement dismantle a 30-year veteran's certainty, one documented data point at a time, without a single moment of self-congratulation. She had thought about it more than once since, not because it was dramatic, because it was instructive, because it reminded her of something she needed to remember in her own work, that confidence and competence are not the same thing, and the surest sign of real expertise is that it never needs to announce itself. Sophie was still asleep when Walter and Renata came back through the showroom. She had woken briefly when she realized the truck wasn't moving, then fallen back under when she didn't see anything alarming. She was good at sleeping in cars, had been since she was an infant, when Walter and Rachel used to drive her around the block at midnight, when nothing else worked. Walter had the kind of memory where certain things live permanently in the body, and the weight of a sleeping infant daughter was one of them. He had left the windows cracked. He always did. Renata saw the girl in the back seat through the lot window and said nothing, but something shifted in her expression, the slight softening that happens when someone sees a child sleeping and is reminded of something true about the world. The midnight blue Q8 she's parked out front is yours, Renata asked. I'm speccing a build, Walter said. The exterior color, does that shade come in a matte option? There's a matte graphite in the RS line. Different trim tier. I can pull the configurator. She paused. You want coffee? I'm fine. Let me pull the configurator. They went inside, and Renata sat down at a desk near the window and pulled up the Audi build system on a large monitor. Walter stood beside her, slightly behind, looking at the screen the way he looked at specifications, without hurry, without distraction, just reading. Brendan was at a desk 15 feet away, pretending to organize something on his computer. He had the particular stillness of a person who is trying very hard to look like they are not paying attention, which is its own form of attention. Two things were visible to anyone watching his face. He understood now that he had made an error, and he had not yet decided what to do with that understanding. These are the two stages that follow a misjudgment, and people handle them differently. Some people skip the first stage entirely and spend all their time in the second. Some people get stuck between them. Brendan was stuck between them. He had been in sales for 4 years. He was good at it. Mostly, good at reading energy, good at knowing which customers would respond to enthusiasm and which wanted to feel like they were being left alone to decide. But his system had a flaw built into its foundation, which is that it started from appearance and worked backward. He had learned this from the two salespeople who trained him, both of whom were 15 years his senior, and had learned it from someone before them, which is how a flawed system perpetuates itself. Not through malice necessarily, but through inheritance. The couple near the Mercedes had bought a GLE. The salesperson in the back had finished her call. The showroom was quiet, except for the soft sound of Renata clicking through trim options. The selenite silver on the RS line is strong, she said, but I think the Q8 in Daytona Gray Pearl might be what you're actually looking for. Walter leaned forward slightly to look at the color swatch. Can you put it in the light tunnel? She clicked something and the render appeared, the car slowly rotating in a simulated outdoor light environment, the color shifting as it turned from almost charcoal in shadow to something richer and colder in direct light. Walter looked at it for a long moment. Rachel would have hated it, he said. The words were out before he'd decided to say them. He stopped. Then, my wife, she died 4 years ago. She liked color. She would have gotten the red. Renata didn't rush to fill the space. She let it sit. Then she said, "What would Sophie choose?" Walter thought about this. Sophie, who was and had opinions about everything, about which cereal was wrong for a Tuesday, about the precise arrangement of her stuffed animals, about why the color purple was more serious than people gave it credit for. Sophie, who had never stopped asking for stories about her mother and received them all without complaint, filing each one away somewhere that Walter hoped was building a portrait. She'd probably say, "Get the red," he said, and she'd probably be right. He paused. "Pull up the Mythos Black. Let me see it next to the red." Brendan came over at 20 minutes past 2. He came over the way people do when they know they owe an apology and are still working out whether to actually give it, with a walk that was half purposeful and half provisional, ready to convert into something else if the situation called for it. "Mr. Pruitt," he said. Walter turned. Brendan's jaw worked for a moment. "I wanted to. I think I may have given the impression earlier that I..." He stopped, restarted. "I steered you toward the pre-owned lot. Before, I shouldn't have done that." The room had gone quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something real is happening in them. Walter looked at Brendan for a moment without saying anything. Not coldly. Walter was not a cold person, but without offering him anything to grab onto. Just looking. "What made you do it?" Walter said. The question surprised Brendan. What made you steer me toward the pre-owned lot?" Walter asked. Was it the truck, the clothes, a pause? Brendan's face moved through something uncomfortable. "Both," he said finally. "Probably." "All right, I heard you," Walter said. "I'm sorry." He turned back to the screen. The two colors, Mythos Black and Catalunya Red, sat side by side in the render, rotating slowly. After a moment, he reached forward and tapped the red. "Pull the build sheet for the Prestige trim in Catalunya Red," he said to Renata. "RS package, panoramic, 22-inch wheels." Renata pulled up the sheet. The total came to $141,200. Walter looked at the number. He was thinking about what it represented, not in terms of what he was spending, but in terms of what it had taken to get here. 12 years of Pruitt infrastructure solutions, 70-hour weeks, winters on job sites in January, missing school plays and making up for them afterward, sitting on the floor of Sophie's room building elaborate block structures at 9 o'clock at night because the hours he owed her didn't disappear just because he was tired. Hiring 4 people, then 12, then 26. Getting it wrong and fixing it and getting it right. The tunnel under those 4 blocks in Bergen County, still carrying water the way water is supposed to move, cleanly, without complaint, exactly where it's supposed to go. "I'll need your account documentation for the cash purchase," Renata said. Formality. Walter nodded. He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and took out his wallet. The same wallet he'd had for 8 years, leather-worn soft at the corner where his thumb always pressed, and from it he took a folded business card. He handed it to Renata. She looked at it. Pruitt Infrastructure Solutions, LLC, founder and CEO. The card was plain white, sans serif font. No logo, no flourishes, nothing it didn't need. She handed it back and pulled up the verification portal. "I'll need your wire routing or a cashier's check dated within 10 business days." "I'll wire it today," he said. She nodded. She began pulling the purchase agreement. Walter walked back through the showroom to the glass door and pushed out into the October air. He went to the truck and opened the passenger door and leaned in to check on Sophie, who had migrated sideways in her sleep and was now using the seatbelt anchor as a pillow. He stood there for a moment, just looking at her. She opened her eyes. "Dad," she said, in the blurred voice of someone surfacing from deep water. "Where are we?" "Car place," he said. She blinked at the showroom. "Are we getting a car?" "We are. What color?" He looked at her, at the crease from the seatbelt along her cheek, at her hair doing something complicated on one side, at the elephant still tucked under her arm. "Red," he said. Sophie thought about this. "Good," she said. Then she closed her eyes again. Renata Hollis ran through the paperwork with Walter at the desk by the window. The process took 40 minutes. At some point, the other saleswoman, a woman in her 30s named Gail, with short-cropped hair and the steady efficiency of someone who had seen this kind of transaction before, brought Sophie a small bottle of orange juice and a granola bar, which Sophie accepted with complete gravity, as if she were receiving something at a very serious ceremony. Brendan was still at his desk. Renata had not said anything to him. She didn't need to. He would carry the lesson, or he wouldn't. That was between him and whoever he decided to become next. Renata had learned over 6 years in this job that some people need to be told the same thing 3 times before they hear it, and some people need to be told once, and some people, the ones who are worth keeping, hear it once and don't need it again. What she had found after 20 years in operations, in construction management, in the particular industry of money and transportation, and the infrastructure of moving things from one place to another, was this: the people who never announced their competence were the ones who had the most of it. She had met plenty of men who wore their success on the outside. In the cut of the jacket, in the table they reserved, in the name they dropped at the beginning of a sentence. She had dealt with them in boardrooms and on job sites and across conference tables. Some of them were genuinely good at what they did. Most of them were performing a version of being good at it, which is a different thing, and a harder thing to distinguish until the moment comes when the performance runs out. Walter Pruitt had never performed anything. Not in the tunnel meeting 7 years ago, and not today. He'd walked into a showroom in jeans and work boots, sat in the driver's seat of a $127,000 car, and proceeded to know exactly what he wanted and exactly what he could afford and exactly how he was going to get it. The only thing he hadn't done was tell anyone any of that in advance. He signed the last page of the purchase agreement. Renata slid the folder shut. The build will be confirmed within 48 hours. Lead time is 12 to 14 weeks. We'll send you a tracker link. Good, Walter said. He stood. He shook her hand. Tell me something, Renata said. Not a professional question. She wasn't in manager mode anymore, just a person talking to another person. The tunnel project. Did you ever wonder whether they'd actually listen to you? Before the independent review came back? Walter considered this for a moment. He picked up his copy of the purchase agreement and folded it once precisely and put it in his jacket pocket. No, he said. Why not? Because the data was the data, he said. Whether they listened wasn't up to me. Getting it right was up to me. Renata nodded, slowly. She had thought about this before, the distinction between what you can control and what you can't, and the particular kind of steadiness that comes from really believing it, not just saying it. She had been working on that belief her whole career, tightening her grip on it in the moments it tried to slip. She thought she was probably still working on it. "Come back when the car's in," she said. "I want to be here when Sophie sees it." Walter almost smiled. It wasn't quite a full smile, more like the outline of one, the suggestion of what a smile was about to do. "She'll have opinions about the wheels," he said. "I'd expect nothing less," Renata said. He took Sophie to lunch afterward at a diner 3 exits down on Route 9. She ordered chocolate chip pancakes at 2:15 in the afternoon without a trace of self-consciousness, and Walter ordered coffee and a turkey club and watched her eat with the specific attentiveness of a parent who is trying to remember everything. The way she cut the pancakes, the way she arranged the syrup, the way she looked up with something on her chin and said, "Is the car gonna smell new?" And when he said yes, she said, "Good, I like that smell. It smells like something is starting." 7 years old. He thought about what she'd said on the drive home, in the way you turn something over and find out what it's made of. Something is starting. She wasn't wrong. She had a way of being not wrong that had nothing to do with her knowing more than her 7 years allowed. It had to do with saying the obvious thing that adults had learned to talk around. The obvious thing was that starting was good. Getting somewhere was good. That you could work for something for a long time, quietly, without announcement, without asking anyone to notice, and then arrive. And arriving didn't mean what people thought it meant. It wasn't the car, he knew that. He'd known it, the moment he sat down in the driver's seat, and found himself thinking about Rachel instead of thinking about the leather. The car was just a car. It was a good car, and Sophie would love the color, and it would last a long time, which was what mattered to Walter. Things that lasted, that were built correctly, that held. What it meant was something simpler. It meant that the work had been worth doing, that the years of 70-hour weeks and job sites in January, and getting it right when getting it wrong, would have been so much easier. It had led somewhere. Not to a dealership exactly, to the knowledge that the tunnel under those 4 blocks was still holding, that 26 people were still employed, that Sophie was sitting across from him cutting her pancakes into precise triangles and had opinions about the smell of new cars. He paid the check. He left a $20 tip on a $31 bill. Because he always had, because Rachel had always insisted, and the habit had outlasted her. Outside, the October sky had gone the pale blue of late afternoon, the kind of blue that feels temporary, like it knows evening is coming. Sophie took his hand crossing the parking lot. "Dad," she said, "Yeah. When the car comes, can I pick the playlist?" "For what?" "For the first drive. The car needs a good first song." He thought about this seriously, because she was serious about it. "Yeah," he said. "You can pick. I'm going to need some time to choose," she said. "You've got 12 weeks. She considered this with appropriate gravity. "I'll start tonight." He unlocked the truck and got her buckled in, and she was already thinking. He could see it, the small furrow between her brows that meant she was working on something. And he walked around to the driver's side and got in and started the engine. The truck made the sound it always made. A low, familiar rumble, with a slight hesitation on the second beat that he'd been meaning to have looked at. He sat there for a moment with the engine running. He would keep the truck. He knew that already. It had been with him through things he didn't have words for, and there were some things you didn't trade in. You found room for them alongside everything else. You made it work. He pulled out of the lot and headed toward Route 9 North. Behind him, Sophie hummed something to herself, low, rhythmic, the early stage of a decision being assembled from the inside out. The kind of work that doesn't look like work from the outside, but is exactly that. Walter drove. The light was going. The road was clear. Some things don't need to be announced to be real. They just need to be built, carefully, correctly, without asking anyone to watch. And then they hold. That's the only kind of thing worth building.